Protests aren't an unusual sight in Iraq. They have been there for the past 16 years. There was stability for the past 2 years, but these recent protests are significant. There's been violent clashes between protesters and security forces, but also there's a real edge to these protests. We spoke to a local journalist, a local Baghdadi journalist. He gave us his eyewitness testimony, but also said that these protests are going to be continuing.
They don't seem scared. They seem determined to achieve their demands, which they believe are deserved rights that any human being around the world should be enjoying, like electricity, jobs, state jobs, and clean drinking water. Just simple as that.
So these latest protests were really spurred on last week when there was the removal of an army official from office. He was seen as well respected, but also as a figurehead for the fight against ISIS. But although this spurred on these protests, there is an underlying undercurrent. To find out why, we spoke to Fanar Haddad, and he told us this.
The proximate trigger for the protests was the removal of, or the demotion of the head of the counterterrorism services, the immensely popular Abdul Wahab al-Sa'idi. But that's not really what the protests are about. This is a culmination of years of anger and frustration. And what we're seeing is a raw expression of a rejection of the political system that has failed the Iraqi people and Iraq for close to 16 years now.
The Prime Minister was quick to come out to social media to say he wanted to understand these protests and said that he was listening to legitimate concerns. But following that, we've spoken to that Baghdadi journalist, Nabil Salih, and he said curfews remain, but also sweeping internet outages. That started with Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram as of yesterday. But in the last few hours, that has turned into a wide internet outage. We've seen 75% of the country, including Baghdad, now offline. That's according to NetBlocks. And we've been speaking to NetBlocks, and this is what they told us. They said that if that outage continues, that this is going to have a massive economic impact. That's because business is reliant on telecommunications for trade, but also they say that we aren't looking at a developing country, but rather a regional power, and that is why this is marked.